out to everybody after the session as well. So as I said, we're going to be covering operations management unit, and Jill's going to be taking us through the slides. What this session won't do is it won't tell you how to get your students to write a standard answer, if you will. What the aim of this session is for you to have an understanding around how as a team we utilise the content when we're developing questions for assessment, but also how your students can study the syllabus in depth and look at the command words that are presented to them in the assessments, and have a better understanding of the depth of answer that we're looking for. So hopefully that will help for you guys to then filter through and deliver to your students. There will be an opportunity at the end for questions and answers. We've had a couple of questions through and we'll tackle those at the end. But I'm thinking with this session, questions are more likely to come up as Jill's presenting. So if you think of anything, you can either drop it into the chat bar, and then we can scroll through that at the end and look at the questions, or make a note of it and then drop it into the chat bar at the end. It's entirely up to you. So I'd like to just introduce you for those who haven't met Gill before. This is Jillian Hater. She is one of our chief examiners at ABE. She's got a wealth of knowledge against all of our ABE qualifications and has been on our team for a number of years now. She also has lots and lots of other jobs that she does, and I'll let her briefly introduce herself and tell you about those. And hopefully you'll see the kind of wealth of knowledge that she's bringing, and the quality of the academic team that ABE maintain in order to sort of bring you these high quality UK qualifications. So Jill, I will hand over to you now.
Excellent. Thanks, Vicky. And hello, everyone. And it's lovely to see you all here. And I recognise.
Sorry.
I think when everyone got muted, so did I. A lot of people would like to mute me all of the time.
No, not me.
Hello, well, I'll start again. Hello, everyone. Lovely to see you. Thank you for giving up your time to work with me in this session that will hopefully support your students. I recognise some faces from our last meeting together, so it's wonderful to see you all again, and welcome to new people that have joined us. Thank you for that introduction, Vicky. I have worked with ABE for many years. I look predominantly after the business managements from level 3 to 5 and some of their other awards as well, particularly the shorter awards and the introductions to qualifications that I know some of the units here today are doing. So my background is, though I have worked in industry, I work predominantly in both academia and training businesses. And so on the academic side, I work with certainly one university. I supervise their MBAs in entrepreneurship. And I've also written some MBA programs for a syndicated university as well. So amongst other things, I'm working very much on the academic side, but I also work with the City of London to support education at all levels and in all areas. And we work for the city, developing any areas that are important. And of course, I know as a city, we share that with lots of other organisations around the world. So I'm delighted to be here today, and I'm going to be taking you through, as Vicky said, the ops management course program. Vicky, do you want me to share my slides, or have you got the slides? Because we haven't. We're obviously delivering this from different sites in the UK, so I can certainly, if you give me the screen, I can put my slides up.
Here we go. I'll do it for you.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Sorry, I'll just get it onto slideshow.
Okay, thank you. So the reason, while this is coming up, the reason that we've highlighted this unit, I mean, we want to obviously develop this in other units, depending on feedback that we get from you and other units. But the operations management, its short is understanding agile and ops management, is so important for most of our learners because it's a mandatory unit at the higher level. And it's also, if you're going into any form of business, this would be the key cornerstone to your academic education that you could build practical information on. And it's one example where we find that our students, perhaps they've jumped from level 3 to 5, but they are not getting the grades they either deserve or work for because they're simply not addressing the unit in the right manner. And we see this time and again, and for that reason we thought it might be helpful to give some tips to our centres so that you know what we're looking for and you can really drum home to your students just what they need to do. Because as I said, often the leap, it goes from 3 to 5. It's a significant leap, and it's one they must get right to get good scores. And of course what we want is everyone doing the best that they can, getting the reward for their hard work, and the first step of that is understanding what they have to do to achieve that, and then it's down to both you and your teaching and them to do the work as well. So if we move on to the first slide, I think Vicky's, are you going to do that for me, Vicky, or can I do it? All right, so thank you, Vicky. So as we, when we're marking, and the first step of this session, which should, I think, take about 20-25 minutes, but I'm hoping for some questions if you know, or I'd like to answer them if you have them, is so that there's a clear understanding for what we're looking at and what we need the students to do. Now, some elements of this actually apply to all our level 5 and 6, and you'll see, okay, some of the level 3 papers as well, but the focus here is clearly on the ops management, which is the key unit that we have in our mandatory qualification. So we're looking for 3 elements. We normally say knowledge, application and evaluation. I've expanded it out here. So for every answer that we're looking for, we need the knowledge, and that is the exact theory, the reference theory, which I'll come on to in a minute. We need to see our students applying that theory in a real life format. And again, I'll expand on that. What does that application look like? And we also need a development or analysis and or an evaluation too. So we need them to be starting with the theory, then putting forward the application, and then evaluating it or justifying it, whatever the command word says. And that's the third part. So if we are looking for a high level distinction paper, it will have these 3 elements here. And we've done a bit of work on understanding what we typically have in an answer. And here I do have to thank our colleague at ABE, Raj Rajesh, who has done a lot of work in this area. Now, Raj actually works to our Professor of Business, David Edgar. And so we've all been having a discussion about where are the key downfalls and what they need to address. Now, typically in an answer, we get mainly level 1 or 2 answers. That's what we'd say is really basic knowledge and theory within an answer. And at level 5, we know that you're teaching them, good theory, good areas, but often the students are not putting it in. And, it's just not enough to say, Porter's generic strategies. We need to see, because it's an assignment, we need to see everything referenced, but we need to see them being the appropriate strategies. Often we just see sort of the top 3 just being put in there. And what it comes to is application, because these aren't the right theories for the question that they're answering. They're just doing what we often call a theory dump. They're just putting what they know in because they think that's going to get marked. If they do that, if a student does that in the paper, what the marker actually says are the initials to the side, TD, which stands for theory dump, which means they've written lots of theory, but it's not the appropriate one. So most answers that we get back are, and this is on average, and the reason we're doing this is because we need to raise this average for our students. So It might be mainly level 1, level 2 marks, typically on the knowledge and theory. Now there already you can see how a student can increase their grades by just adding more theory. These are not 3-hour exams, these are assignments. They have time to do it. Therefore, they have the time to work out and do the research. Application is usually limited to a level 2 answer. Often, if we're talking about applying it to an organisation, it's often a description where they would say, they'd choose an international company and they'd say, McDonald's has a training program, and they'll describe something very, very generic rather than giving it a clear application for why they're looking at some specific area in operational management. And development and evaluation, often we get a slightly higher grade here, usually level 3, where people are giving an opinion. Problem is that opinion is based on something that they haven't developed in depth, so that will always be limited. But often we see a bit more development and analysis, but still there is a way to go. And finally, often there is, and I've highlighted the 3 key things that we mark for, but of course in all answers and all assignment answers, there's a synthesis. So I can't say that, a synthesis. And that's where we see the logical flow and with some element of conclusion. Now that is often very well the best constructed part of the question. So they know how to conclude, it's just the building blocks that we have. So if we move on to the next slide, here I want to show you, it takes a couple of seconds for the slide to wear its way through. I'm going to take you through the problems of what we're seeing and the generic issues, but it's fair enough at this point, because we've had different exams. Obviously, you've either been on exams, assignments, and now we have open book. The assignment is the equivalent of an open book assessment. They are given considerable time to write it, and so we expect them to show originality. Often I see papers where they have just, there's a whole paragraph of what someone has written. Well, sometimes a quote enhances an answer, but it shouldn't replace the answer. We want to see it in their own words. Meaningful development, as I've always also said. The next point is the command word. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on command words shortly, but they must look at the command word, look at the ABE guide if they're not sure, or if you're not sure as an educator, and just want to clarify what we mean by that. And they must address the command word. And this is often an easy way where our students lose their way, because we have a command word that at a lower level would say explain. Well, what's explain? Well, it's the who, what, where, when, why, and how. They have to answer all those 6 points to explain something. But when we get onto evaluation and justification, and what I've got in here is a table of the key command words, but ABE does publish its command words for you. But the command word is absolutely key. So address the task requirement, and that is looking at the command word. And of course, focus and depth. It's a level 5 paper, therefore we need theoretical points, research, different perspectives, perhaps controversial perspectives. As long as it's argued, that's what we need to see, but it has to be theoretically based. So if we go to the next slide, where I'll highlight for you, and I hope this next slide is really crucial to supporting you as educators, and that's the problem areas. The answers for this paper are just too descriptive. They are often too simplistic, and as I said, we do get some well, I'll remind you, we do get some great papers, but the reason we're here is because on average this is what we're seeing. And so while it sounds harsh, it's so that you know what they need to focus on to help them with their grade. So often their answers are too simplistic, easy level answers to address what should be a difficult and taxing question at level 5. Command word, which I've mentioned, and I will mention again because it's important, and a poor application of their knowledge, really having a look at their theory and which is the best theory that they've learned with you. Also, perhaps a lack of depth in this theory. Again, just stating what the theory says isn't quite enough. It's for us to understand that the student really knows the best way to apply it. Possibly at this point, some of the pros and cons of that theory, because obviously not all theories apply to all businesses. Also, reproduction from the study guide. I have to say, this is a personal bugbear of mine, because often I am reading my own words, and frankly, the students should be able to write it better than me, because they're sitting there, it's their own thoughts, and just reproducing the study guide will not get them any marks, mainly because the marker is usually the person that's written it, so they will identify it pretty rapidly. I have to say, I've written 3 books for ABE, and I can spot my own work being reproduced absolutely like that, and so can the markers. But also, they just shouldn't be doing it, and with an assignment, we want to see a breadth of thought. And a lack of wider research for analysis. Obviously, this work needs to be referenced. We do look at the reference list. We do randomly sample some of the references that they put on, if it's either accessed on the web or it's something that we've not seen before. Because again, the student might have come up with a great bit of research that we want to see and see what our students are looking at. So there should be a wider level of research here. So those 7 points are probably the key. If you see where their problems are, these are the things you can directly address when you're giving them support as to how to write the assignment. Together with the ABE assignment guide, that is very generic, but for this paper particularly, these 7 points are really important. So if we move on, I'm going to give you a few more examples in this area. So let's have a look at sort of very easy top tips. Not simple, not describing, focusing on the command word, applying the knowledge, because they work hard for this paper, they will learn a lot of knowledge in there. Depth and development, not producing theory from the study guide and providing wider research. That's what we need them to do. How this translates into higher scores is on the next slide, which you've already had a sneaky preview of. It's showing that we start off in an assignment with the knowledge. We then discuss the application, and I'm going to give you some good examples that I hope will help you on the application. We then show the development of the answer and the theory that's being put forward, justifying it or evaluating it, and then we have a conclusion. And all of this should be a logical flow. We follow that process. You state the theory, you state the application, you analyse it, and then you conclude it. And that should give us a great form and a great synthesis in an answer. And as I said, too often the knowledge is low level, the application is a level 1 to 2 or not there at all. Development can be, is often seen as stronger, but it's based on poor knowledge and application. Okay, so while it's brief, there aren't, we can see that our students are being educated. The reason that I feel I can cover this in 20 minutes and not, whole day training course, is because these are small applications that we feel you need to do to help them make significant results. So let's move on to give a few examples of how we're going to work on this with the next slide. And the command word I've mentioned, too often, and we see this from people who are sitting their first grade exams all the way through. Students often do not use the command word. However, they haven't got the pressure of the clock ticking for 3 hours. It's a simple thing. If they're not sure what the command word is, they just go online and have a look at the ABE guide. And for level 5, typically, I would expect to see analyse, assess, discuss, evaluate, and justify. And this construction of the response is the arguments that flow to the task. But they're going to be the 5 command words that we see. And as I said, I rarely see other ones at this level. So let's have a look at what they mean. If we look first at analyse, oh, that's a little bit small for my eyes, so I'll read it. I'm just going to turn away because I'm going to read it from the paper. I hope you can see it. Analyse is examining in detail. So you're identifying characteristics, making links, using logical thinking to identify cause and effect. Cause and effect is perhaps I should have highlighted that one. That is a classic way to answer an analyse question. So I've got the guidance there, and all this is available from ABE. And a question, what it means, you'd break it into its constituent parts. You'd look at depth of each part using supporting arguments for and against, and how they interrelate, such as the cause and effect. So assess is about making an informed judgment. What we look at is the factors that apply, we recognise evidence, we make a decision about the quality, value and importance of what is being stated. And again, we are weighing up to what extent it's true and applicable. And they need to persuade us as the readers that the argument is a valid one, it has good research, and they point out any counter arguments as well. And at the end of an assessment, you must conclude how far you agree with the original proposition. And as you know, as educators, we don't mind what they say as their conclusion, as long as it's justified. They could tell you there's life on Mars, provided they gave me evidence here and now. This is how we do it. So that is what we're looking for. Are they justifying it correctly? Are they assessing it correctly? So discussion, you're presenting key points and you're making links, you're taking into account opinions, and you're identifying different areas of strengths or weakness in any data. It's almost a written debate, isn't it? Discuss. I think this is true to this extent, or I disagree with it and this is why. So we see already all three command words are very closely linked, but this guide gives us a straight clear that what they must answer for each. Now, if we move on to evaluation, that's where we give a verdict, an extent of a statement or findings within a piece of research, whether it's true or not, and to what extent do you agree. You draw a conclusion based on what you think is the most important factors, and you justify how you've made your choice. So it's a supported evidence-based judgment. The last two, and I realise that I'm reading these out and you could read them yourself, but I just want to give you a bit of context around it. If we're examining closely, we are providing an account, we're providing evidence, and again, the same as with analysis, we are cause and effect. And finally, justify, a little bit similar to evaluate, but what we often see is we learn how to evaluate. So at level 6, we're critically evaluating, but at justifying, we analyse the positives and negatives for each of the options available, and we must give a recommendation. And of course, the key in justification is those in your recommendation, the positives have to outweigh the negatives. So they can't go for something that they've been saying is pretty poor all the way along. So they're the key areas of analysis, command words that we have. And hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're looking for, and that will help your students in addressing the command words, because that's, as I said, one of the 7 areas we need to look at. And I'll reiterate for the final time, this definition is somewhere within ABE that can be signposted as you go on. There's a clear guidance in the assignment portal element. So if we move on to the sort of the remaining couple of slides. Where I want to talk about organisation. Now, for those of you that were on the webinar when we talked about the open book exam, one of the questions was about using local organisations. We are super keen for local organisations to be highlighted, used, analysed here. The problem is there enough evidence for the student to use that organisation? And I could use this slide for almost any paper that we have from level 3 and above. Often we recommend the multinationals because you can access their balance sheet, reports, articles about them. If they're a big company, there will be research done on it. So that is the only reason why we encourage multinational corporations, but they can still be the biggest corporations in your area. We don't have a problem, but you must ensure that you have got enough information that helps the student develop a substantive response. And so it can't be a very small business. It could be for the entrepreneurship units, but for these, for ops management, they need to have the information. And so when they choose an organisation, it's important that they look at the academic sources. And that can include Google Scholar, other journals, ResearchGate that we have some access to at ABE. So ensure they can get that information. So if we move on to the next slide. I want to give you an example of a particular organisation, and I'm just going to sort of give you some examples of how we are answered. Now, interesting, there are about 4 organisations that I see regularly: McDonald's, KFC, Coca-Cola, Google, sometimes Facebook. It's interesting, actually. Often when students are writing about Google and Facebook and Microsoft, they are not writing from an analytical point of view. For Facebook, they are writing from what most students probably have seen on the film, you know, The Social Network. They are not showing detailed analysis of what they're saying, and they get a little bit talking about the leaders rather than the organisation themselves. So again, thinking particularly about the organisations, you still have to do the research in those organisations. But if we take McDonald's, a good example, because lots of academic papers done about it, an understanding of the competitive industry. So we've got an example here. I'm not going to read fully all the way through it, but you know, if somebody's saying the operations and its strategic areas or peculiarities, we don't use that word in exams anymore, a little bit odd, but if we talk about that, we say, you know, McDonald's operates in a competitive industry and it influences performance objectives. And we know that from our research that for McDonald's, they are described as quality, cost, dependability, and flexibility. There's one more. Speed, yes. So they're the 5 operational performance objectives that that organisation has. Already, I see that somebody's done some research here. We know that it's a mostly franchise organisation and it has reputational risks that we would explain later on. It talks about the political, legal and social markets it serves and those impacts. So in this paragraph here, we're seeing a learner that is talking about some of the key assessment criteria. It's identifying that there are issues that are important to them on logistics, sourcing of goods, sourcing of food goods, operational risks and performance objectives. So that is starting off as a quality answer to operations management, rather than, you know, McDonald's serves 25 million, I don't know off the top of my head, well, they won't be at the moment, 25 million customers in the UK each day, or, you know, worldwide 4 million. It has a presence in 40 countries. It started in 1942. By the way, all these facts I'm just coming off the top of my head. That is not showing us any understanding of operational management, but it is often the starting point that our learners come from. And we don't want to know when McDonald's was formed, and we don't really worry who started it, and we don't certainly want to know about Raymond Kroc. We want to know that its performance objectives are these 5 and start answering the question in a level 5 manner. So I hope that helps you give a bit of an understanding, contrasting what I often see when it comes to McDonald's as to what I want to see when it comes to McDonald's. So if we have a second example, which is on the next slide. To get the response to that question, I want them to be focused and give good quality references to support it. We encourage our students, and I know at many of the centres you do as well, to use Harvard referencing with in-context referencing as in-text referencing as well. And I think often when we're getting our students to think about their assignment, you know, the phrase that I've used here is get a holistic approach in developing the response. And what I mean by that is, you know, going back to scratch and getting the blank piece of paper that says, you know, we're starting with operational management. These are the key objectives and learning objectives for this question that we're asking. So what is it that the marker wants us to put in there? In an assignment, you can do that, can't you? You can open your syllabus and you can see that this question directly is relating to learning objectives 1 and 3, maybe, assessment criteria 1.2, 1.3, and that helps them start to absolutely understand what we're going to be marking based for. And of course, as I said, using the 6 tips, looking at the 7 problems, but only 6 tips to resolve them. you know, give a logical and meaningful judgment and conclusion at the end. So I hope that's helped to give you a structure. If we just move on to the next slide. It takes a few minutes on my computer, I think. Right, a very busy slide, I realise. It's just to remind you about, there are two things in here. The referencing, which has been highlighted, and what I would be looking at. So it gives you a short exemplar with analyse as the command word. Obviously, I know you as educators know how to answer this. However, as a marker, what I would be looking for would be, they've given a statement about costs and quality, and they've used the Slack et al. Reference. So I'm seeing actually a good application of an academic theory. I'd also say the evidence from Hill, CWL and Jones, I'd say, well, you know, we don't often see that. They're looking further around the knowledge. Chambers and Johnson coming back in, again, that would support that they've used a slightly different academic theory, and they've used that to apply to McDonald's. So all of these in the yellow are showing me that this learner has applied. So they've gone through the knowledge and they've gone through the application bit. And even though it's only a paragraph, I am seeing a good element of development and synthesis as well. So we would be looking for, you know, a good mark for this paper on all levels. So if we go to the next one, and obviously you'll have these slides so you can see the exemplar as well. If we look at the next slide, please. This gives us a pause moment to have a read perhaps of the analysis as well. And hopefully it's going to move along. There you go. So again, you've got here for you to look at in your leisure an example using assess as a command word. Again, I'm not going to read it to you. Instead, let's pull out, you know, what I'd be looking for as a marker. I'm seeing that they have got knowledge and they have applied that theory, and they've used the Slack and Chambers. We also, though, see a logical analysis. Now, it's pink on my screen, so hopefully you can see that as well. They also show the linking of the theories that they've had with wider research, and that's in the second paragraph. So they're talking about fast casual dining sector and who are now entering it, and this is specific in, you know, McDonald's being seen as, you know, the really low end of the fast food sector, and actually people want fast food but they want it a bit higher, you know, bit more expensive and a bit more of an experience. And on the third paragraph, nice clear conclusion. The student said, it's evident there's linkage between the objectives and the corporate objectives, which would have been put earlier on. They, you know, suggest they review them periodically, excuse me, and align it to market expectations. Well, there's an interesting point. They've just come back and got the second paragraph in about the new market expectations, people going to competitors such as Five Guys and Chipotle. So that's a great statement to have. Align with the market expectations so that they keep meeting the needs that they need to, and they keep their competitive advantage. So hopefully this exemplar will give a good example to you as educators and to your, you know, helping your students in seeing how we are applying, you know, how students can apply the required criteria, and, you know, it tells you what a good answer looks like. So if we move on to the closing section. Just really a summary. When we said about knowledge and development, you know, what we see is the composed series of arguments presented in those two slides. You know, there's no personal opinion. It's just a collection of well-referenced knowledge applied in context and given. You know, a smashing answer, and one I would love to see when I'm marking, and I'm sure you'd love your students to be producing. So at this point, I'm going to sort of open the floor to questions. I don't know if you want to sort of call them out or put them in the chat. I do have the next slide. Oh, we still had a couple of slides to go, Vicky, sorry. I was just giving everyone the opportunity of thinking. If perhaps we could have the final slides.
it's really difficult to, on my screen, to have the slides up and see all the people.
Well, that's okay. Do you know what? Leave the slides because you can still see me, so that is fine. So if you're happy with that, we'll just continue without the slides because there's only 3 more to go. And what I have got is giving you the references for the exemplar in the format we'd want to see them, good old Harvard referencing. And, and finally, we just go to the sort of the 7 points again. And, I'd call them strict don'ts. Strict do not. Don't reproduce a series of definitions to build a response. Don't, what I say, pad out the theory without developing it. So it's the theory dump. We don't want to see that. Don't put unnecessary pictures within the response. That is quite a common area. And often it doesn't add value. I had somebody in a paper that I recently marked that put some cartoons in. They just didn't add value to, they were relevant to the organisation, but they weren't relevant to a level 5 paper. It made me smile though, so it was a nice break. Don't insert print schemes from the study guide. We see this quite a lot, particularly the diagrams that are in the study guide. They're not to do that, and it looks really sloppy, and it's not allowed. And also, if you're going to reproduce those diagrams, which you can reproduce, you must link it in with the development. Don't just put it in the diagram. I often see Anshoff's matrix just put in there, and nobody's really telling me why they've put it in there, but they have just put that diagram in. And of course, it's a final reminder about dubious sources. Don't use ghost essay sites such as UK Essays. Wikipedia, we do ask students to stay away from them, but we do accept that a lot of universities do use Wikipedia, but generally they might use that as their first source to carry on, and that's fine, but stay away from dubious sources. The problem with Wikipedia, of course, it's not it doesn't guarantee the quality. The references are written by submitters rather than an organised body. And for wider research, obviously, you can use a Google search engine to start off with. Use Google Books for your choice of searching. Access good academic texts from the list that's generated, and access the knowledge from it and integrate it into your development. Ideally, absolutely in your own words. And make sure also, finally, that when you're referencing it, it is complete, because we do, as I said, we do look at the referencing. So in that short time, which actually I realised took more than 20 minutes, so I do apologise. Hopefully you have got a stronger idea of what we're looking at in the marking. The whole purpose of this isn't to be beating down the students and saying, which is why the don'ts seem a bit negative, but it's absolutely, these are the things you stay away from. If you are doing these things, you will not score a great mark, and what we want is for them to get the best that they can be. So I'd certainly like to open it up to questions if you have any. Perhaps if you're on video, put your hand up or access the chat. I don't know, Vicky is a very good moderator. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Where are you?
If nobody starts, Jill, I just have one question. Okay, I just want to know, maybe on behalf of the academy, I just want to know for the case of a student, okay, what will be the marks from the eyes of examiner for a student who is going to answer, like suppose your earlier case, McDonald one, okay, because you have, I've noticed, giving a priority in originality, right, with theory. So the 4-step level: theory, application, development, and synthesis. Suppose a student here, because I'm learning from student, like a lot of these students, the new students, they want originality and they lack theory side. That's what I've seen. So what will be your marking criteria. For that student, will he or she, I give a scenario, fail or pass or merit or distinction. Okay. I just want to know, suppose if he answer your McDonald's question,
yeah,
where he will not be using any theory, but he got lost in writing,
yeah,
okay, that McDonald, in the objective, he will highlight clearly. The objective is fast processing and complete circle from customer to, order to burger delivery within 4 minutes. And his or her weakness may be, she did not refer to any academic, as you have shown.
yeah.
But he or she will engage you deeply by referring to his or her common knowledge, original knowledge. Like I have seen it, rather than seen in KFC or Burger King or other store. But he or she may not make any professional reference, as you have shown in the slide, or he or she may lack to highlight particular theory, but he or she will deeply apply it as he or she has observed it and develop a good story. And at the end, proper synthesis that will show proper operational performance. So from the point of examiner, what will be the mark will look like for this kind of student?
Okay. So I can give you what I think is a really clear answer to that. And I just made a few notes of how you did it. And one word you said that I picked up on was they're telling a great story. If somebody, so you know where I'm coming from. If somebody is telling us a whole lot of knowledge about the business, and they could tell, as I said, I really don't care how McDonald's started. What I want to know is it meeting its objectives? Then if they are just telling us the story, they are not writing a level 5 paper. And what they need to know is to get a good mark at level 5, they need to look at all 4 aspects. And I'm going to take you through what marks we give. So just to avoid the confusion, an operations management is a level 5 qualification, so we know that. But the marking also comes in levels. So these levels, the 4 levels I'm going to talk about, nothing to do with, whether you're doing it at 3 or 5. So when we are marking a paper, we put it into, there are 4 bands for marking. So the first one is well, technically 5. The first one is 0, and they don't offer anything of value at all. That's a really rare time. I've rarely given, I don't think I've ever given a 0, or unless it's they don't answer the question. But if they've attempted it, the first point is, if we're looking at a 25 mark question, the first level is between 0 and 9 marks. That is, and the guidance to the mark would be descriptive answer. Does not apply theory, does not state theory, does not show development or application. The next banding would be between 10 and 15. On average, these change between papers, and that'd be a level 2 one. And you would say the student is explaining, and they are showing some theory and applying it to their business. So McDonald's is being discussed in the light of this theory. We then have a level 3 question answer, and that would be between 16 and round about 20, 21. As I said, it's different on different papers. And that would be where you say a good answer, they are showing knowledge and theory and of application, and they are starting to show, there is some element of conclusion. You then move into the top tier answer, which if you were answering at this level for all of them, you'd be getting a distinction. And that would be between 20 to 25, if it was a 25 mark question, and often they are in these. And that would be, they have shown the synthesis of the knowledge, theory and application. And they have shown good referencing, good grammar. You don't get marked down, but it's not about perfect English. It's about the way they've written it. That would be, and if the student did that 4 times in a paper, they would have a distinction. Interestingly, so that's, and I hope that answers your question. We start off, if they're not doing the theory, they are not going to pass, because they're only going to get between 0 and 9, and if they do that constantly, and that's the problem, and that's why we see quite a lot of people at the margin of pass to fail, because they're only getting these level 1 and 2 answers. So I hope you understand also the difference between what I'm saying about ops management in this suite of ABE being level 5 and how we mark. Interestingly, there will also be a caveat for all markers, which say, if the answer doesn't relate to the organisation, you don't get any marks at all. So if, and in some it is absolutely strict, if you are asked a question that says you must refer to your organisation and you don't, you could end up getting 0 marks. It depends on how the question's worded. It might be, if there's a tiny bit of application, you'll get, you know, the 1, 2, 3 or 4. But if they're not writing about McDonald's in any of their paper, they will not receive a pass because the questions have all said specifically. And I think that relates a lot, just sort of as a quick aside, as we always have, in other papers where they've said, you know, like in HR, you know, you must be writing about an organisation, and you say you're going to write about Toyota and then never write about Toyota. That's not showing application. So, you know, this is where the relating it to the organisation is important. So, Suren, does that answer your question?
Thank you so much. It is crystal clear. Now I got to see even like, or for example, at what point they'll get 9 marks, 15 marks, the way you see the level. It gives us a general frame as a, you know, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
The one thing, hello, I'm Chucha from Amisha. Right. So the one thing I want to know is that your presentation is very good, very clear, right? But students also want to know before they sit the exam like that. So each and every unit, your paper also, when you release the exam paper, roughly explanation, not in details, right? How you present this instruction will be provided from your AB. If you can provide to the students, it will be very good for them, how they can answer, right?
So yes, you want the student to get a presentation like this. For that,
yeah, near the exam.
Unmute Vicky. We'll ask Vicky to unmute.
Sorry?
So as an awarding organisation, we are bound to sort of work with centres to deliver the content of our qualifications, so that there is a clear boundary between us and the students. If students were to engage with us directly, it would be purely on a registration and booking assessment basis. We would clearly get them to sign terms and conditions that would say we don't do any tuition directly with students. So what we're trying to do is help our centres by running sessions like this, and we'll provide you with the recording, the slides. And then what we would say to you is, as tutors, you'll need to take it and localise it to your students, and deliver this kind of thing to them, to say, look, you know, we obviously work closely with ABE, we're understanding how, you know, they expect to see the application and the knowledge, and you would need to give that information to your students, so that we remained impartial, that our relationship is with you and your relationship is with the students from a tuition point of view and a guidance point of view. So as much as we would love to do this kind of stuff, it kind of muddies the waters between us and our regulator, and they say, well, now you might have a vested interest in those students, the outcomes of those students. So if Jill was to deliver lots of these sessions to students and get to know the students, when she's marking a paper, she might go, oh, it's such and such student, I like them. And she might have an unconscious bias towards them. She wouldn't, because she's a thorough professional, but we need to make sure there's no instance of conflict of interest. So we can't actually offer that service, but we can do this to help you provide that to your students, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Must have done a really good job there, Jill, I think. Okay. All right.
Hi, good day. This is Janelle Ramkisoon. Are you all hearing me?
Hi, Janelle.
Yes, I'm from actually CTS College, and I do have a question. I'm actually one of the lecturers that lectured the operations module, and one of the things I wanted to find out is, as a tutor, would I be able to get guidance in terms of, you know, maybe a sample script, and it doesn't even have to be, it could be like, you know, one that is a very, very good paper, like a distinction paper, maybe a merit paper, so that in my lecturing and that kind of thing, I'll be able to, you know, even when I'm, you know, giving the students little guidance, it will come from a place of, you know, exactly what the examiners are looking for.
It's difficult, Janelle, on that, because again, it's that fine line that we have to keep between between offering too much in the way of coaching and guidance. But I guess we could do, we are looking at producing something around what does a good answer look like, so what does a pass, a merit and a distinction look like in a more generic form. So I think we could possibly come up with something whereby we do something that's more generic that could be applied across the units. If we were to provide examples of that kind of work for each unit, it could encourage students not to sort of do their own application and their own knowledge. So we need to be really careful with that. But I think Jill, I don't know if you agree with me, we probably could do something that would give an example of what do we mean by this application and this depth, and give an example. But it might not necessarily be something that we could do for every unit. It'd have to be more generic of how that would look across the units.
Yes, I think that might help. Could I also add that after every exam session, there is an examiner's report, and that also, Janelle, can be helpful to you in seeing what were the strengths of the paper, and what needed to be improved, and in effect the weaknesses. I think for the paper that you're looking at, or we are all looking at today, you know, it's such a common problem, which is the reason we're here, to try to support you in doing that. But I'd also advise, always have a look at the examiner's report to see if there's anything that you feel actually, you know, that's something we could really have a push on in our next session.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've made a note, Janelle, that I'll kind of feed back to our academic team and see who fancies having a go at that, in terms of what does good look like, or what does pass, merit and distinction look like, what are the differences between the three. We've got a question in the chat bar from Anne Marina. You say, what would you say to students who believe that their focus should be on solving business problems and can't see the importance of academic writing as they see it, in a sense related to the approach Seren referred to? I'm not really sure, Anna Marina, that I know how to answer that, because they need to do some academic writing to pass that qualification. So I wonder if you want to, there you are.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not suggesting they don't. And the thing is that they have to, and we recognize why they have to, and we tell them why they have to. But it's interesting that Seren raised that, because there are students, even at the MBA level, who believe that they know enough about an organization. They can read a lot of the theories, they can assimilate the information, and then they can sit and write.
Yeah.
And so they're saying, I'm just giving some, the kinds of comments you have from students. And then you say, well, no, you have to provide referencing, because, it's a lot of things are evidence-based. And when you go into the workplace, you must provide support for what you say. And, writing and putting in your references is a way of building that skill and that competency. But it would be interesting to hear what Jill has to say in terms of how you would respond to a student who asks that question.
Well, Anna Marina, I think that's a great question, and I think it's something that we get asked quite, with students in all our roles at whatever level. I bet we've all had a student that said that to us. And actually, Anna Marina, I think your answer you answered it yourself. What you're saying to the student is spot on. I think the problem is we do get students who just don't really get why, you know, that they're enrolled on an academic program so that they can learn how to be a better business person, and they suddenly start to forget, you know, that they have to do the academic because they just want to focus on going out there and working in business. But we see, you know, in living, breathing, working business lives, these models are being used and businesses are taking them on board, and it is really important. I mean, let's take the, you know, the BCG matrix that you cover, particularly Anna Marina. I mean, that is, you know, a whole swathe of consulting companies were founded, or they developed that. They were a consulting group that founded it, and then it went even further, and it is used in, you know, a lot of the top organizations. I can't reference that quote, by the way, but, you know, we know that the academic application is the foundation of understanding why a business works and why a business works successfully. Because what we get is a successful business. Somebody researches it to say, what were the key success factors? What is it that we can distill from that? You know, has it applied in other businesses? Yes, here's a model, let's develop it. So hopefully those students are in the minority, but, you know, to get an academic qualification that is recognised with the stamp that AB has on its qualifications, and therefore recognised by employers, they have to show that they have an academic understanding.
Yeah, and I think that's the why when lecturers are speaking to students to convince them.
Yeah.
And I think start with the why you have to do things in a particular way. The how and the what eventually fall into place because the students are clear as to the purpose of doing it in that particular way. And I think sometimes when we try to speak to students about what they need to do and how they need to reference and what is too descriptive and that sort of thing, but prior to that discussion, you speak to them about the why it has to be done in this particular way. How does the approach of getting the theory, applying it, and synthesizing the information become so critical to their own understanding of business solutions? Because if they say this, I want to solve problems, and somebody tells them, okay, you need to do this and write an essay, I do think the why is actually really, really critical.
Yeah.
So that the purpose of raising that was to sort of bring that to the fore so that people can hear that that's important. The second thing I want to do very quickly, if you don't mind, with respect to Janelle's question, I think one of the things that would be quite useful is if there would be some sort of narrated PowerPoint presented for the units of some of the modules by the examiner or maybe a lead tutor at ABE, outlining how the unit ought to be approached, both from the teaching and the learning, how the assignments ought to be approached, because I think a session like this is really very, very useful, not only for the people who are teaching ops management, but for lecturers across the board. So if we were to get, and I know some of the universities do it, they do a narrated PowerPoint. It doesn't have to be more than about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, and that could be shared with students. So that would be my recommendation. And you know, when you talk about the marking scheme, that's 0 to 9 to 20 to 25, I'm assuming it's somewhere documented, but somehow students do not read as much. And if they have to listen to a 10 or 15-minute video, I think it will go a long way to helping them write better papers.
Okay. I think our plan is to tackle each unit from the poorest pass rate upwards, to do something similar like this. So as I said, we can't do something specifically for students, but we can provide this stuff for you guys. So you'll get access to Jill's slides. I'll have a look, Anna Marina, where the mark scheme scales are. I know there's some descriptors in the qualification specifications, but we're having a assessment materials meeting this Friday. So we'll have a look at mark schemes and we'll see what we can share, because I don't think there's any harm in sharing the sliding scale of how we mark stuff with our centres, so that they can see how points are accumulated. I don't think there's any secret there. So there might be some more that we can actually share. in terms of doing a narrated PowerPoint, we could look at doing that, because obviously Jill's done the PowerPoint for this and it's fairly easy to put a voice over it. The purpose of us recording this Zoom is that it could be watched back with the slides, and then you get the addition of the questions that are asked at the end as well, so that you get other people's input and other people's questions that are then answered, so you get slightly more than just the slides, I guess. You get it more interactive, as joining this session would be. So leave all those things with me. We won't be able to do a whole sweep of every single unit straight away, but we are definitely tackling them in the sort of worst performing upwards, so that we can hopefully see if these make any difference. We're also doing other things behind the scenes as well. We constantly review the way that we develop our assessments and our mark schemes, and do standardisation.
Sure.
So yeah, I think all valuable feedback. Thank you, as ever, Anna Marina. I can always rely on you for some valuable feedback. Any other questions before we finish off? No? Okay. Well, thank you for all attending. Those of you that got up early, those of you who stayed up late, and those of you that are in mid-afternoon. Like I say, a massive thank you to Jill for taking us through that. And as I said, we will be sending out the slides along with this recording, probably tomorrow, might be later on today, but you'll receive them fairly quickly. So, but if you have any follow-up questions, just drop me an email, and I can forward that onto Jill. So hope you all have a good rest of the day, and thank you again, and see you soon at the next one.
Vicky, just permit me to say thank you on behalf of the Caribbean, just saying thank you on behalf of all the Caribbean centers represented. Thank you very much, Jillian. This was a very detailed, on-point session. I particularly liked the examples, because I know from experience that a lot of our centers here locally probably may have been guilty of some of the theory dump that you directly mentioned. So bringing that out in such a clear, specific way was particularly useful, I think, for me, and would also inform some of the other work that I'm doing with the lecturers in the region as well. So thank you on behalf of the entire Caribbean and the rest of the team at ABE, basically, for a session. Vicky, thank you so much for your willingness to work with us, and what you do and what you bring to the product and academic development team. So this is just me saying thank you very much on behalf of all of us. And I know Sured will echo those sentiments as well. So thank you.
You're very welcome, Krista. And might I just say that your makeup is looking very on point this morning. You put me to shame. I should have glamorized myself prior to this session.
Oh, don't worry, too many meetings. I have another one with later.
No, I've seen you with that eye makeup and that lipstick. You know, it's just shocking, this look. So I will do better next time, guests.
You're too much. You're too much. You're too much. Have a good one, guys. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
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 Thank you, Carissa. Thank you, Vicky. Thank
That's
you,
okay,
Jill.
thank you. See
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.